I couldn't be more excited about this episode, Mr. Crawford. We've got an amazing guest on today. And this guy's been in my circle for a couple of years now, and partner with him in business, partner with him on various rucks around town, which is a new venture that we're going to get into. He got me into rucking, but Casey Strunk with Strunk HR and Rise and Ruck Phoenix is on the pod. An amazing guy. I'm excited to get in this conversation. Casey, you got an incredible story and can't wait to hear all about it. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Steven. Phil, what's up? Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
It's so great to have you on. I know we've been kicking it around for a while. And for the listeners, this is another one of our brothers from the Junto Mastermind here in Phoenix and a newer member to the group, but not anymore. With all the contributions, just coming off a summit, it has been a real pleasure getting to know you in the last couple years and doing what you're doing in the Valley, defining success for yourself. There couldn't be a more matching guest for this podcast. I'm glad we're getting it done. I guess from a starting point, like most people want to hear is, could you just give us just a little overall background on just high level, your origins here in the Valley, what led you to business, and we will double click on many of those areas after you give us a rundown.
Yeah, of course. I am a native Phoenician. My family has Midwest roots, but I was born and raised here in the Valley. Went to Thunderbird High School, grew up kind of in North Phoenix, and then had the privilege of attending Northwestern University on a golf scholarship. Got to go back to Chicago and play some fantastic courses across the Midwest and across the country. Got a degree that I probably didn't deserve, and then ended up back in Phoenix in August of 2004 and started working with my father inside of the employee benefits agency that he started 42 years ago. And so you look up and 20 years have gone by inside the employee benefits space. I bought the agency from him about 6 years ago. I've got two daughters, Rachel and Margaret, that are 6 and 9, and wife Teresa. So.
That's awesome. It's a great story. I grew up, Phil and I met actually at my dad's company when I was 22. He was 21. So I have some experience working with my father for some time. I did not buy the company for my dad. He sold it to ADP. I did not have the cash to do that back then, but experiencing working with your father, I know you probably enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed working with mine and learning so much from them. And we have these mentors in our family, and that's a neat way to get the opportunity to get started. And now you fully own the operation and running a great group and a great firm and take care of your clients at a high level. Talking about Northwestern and the golf thing, though, before we get into the business stuff, did you have dreams of getting on PGA and making that a career?
I mean, I 100% did at periods of time in my life. And I was having a conversation just on our last ruck with some of the guys, having two daughters now. And I was trying to remember, at what point in time did I start to eliminate sports and start to get really serious about golf? For me, I didn't feel like it was until I was 11, 12, 13 years old when I identified that I wanted to play golf in high school, and then obviously worked really hard and identified that I wanted to try to play golf collegiately. And my two great career plans were always to either come home and try to play a little bit of professional golf, or lean on all the relationships that I had built over a period of 10 or 15 years with business owners around the Valley and try to contribute to my father's agency. And I had to look in the mirror at age 22 and really decide, am I doing all the right things now? Am I willing to make all the sacrifices that it would take to potentially try to go play professional golf? And I simply was not disciplined enough. And I was ranked, in the top 50 nationally my senior year. But there's a very clear distinction between those that are going to make it and those that are not. Having played with Luke Donald at Northwestern, top amateur in the world when he graduated, NCAA champion, later world number one, it was clear what it took to be on tour, and I didn't quite have that. So.
There are levels, like everything in life, to that game. And it's the whole reason I wound up in Phoenix and can, at a much lower level where you found success and a part of that team, that's where I had to give up on it, was realizing, coming from small town Missouri and where I was trying to play D2, D3 compared to trying out at Scottsdale Community College and then Arizona State, that there are distinct levels on what control you have over the golf ball. And just the fact that you made it to that level in that program's unreal. I was telling Stephen about that. And for the listeners that aren't big golf fans, Luke Donald, he's the Ryder Cup captain this year for Team Europe. And as Casey said, world number one at one point for a brief stint, has played some great golf. And going through that experience, what was the team dynamic like? And how did it shape how you were operating at that given time, being a college athlete at Northwestern and figuring those things out? It's such a demanding schedule along with the academics. Like, can you give us a rundown on what was kind of going through your mind at that time of your life?
Yeah, while the golf was probably the most important thing to me at the time, it was really just the vehicle by which all of the lessons that I learned happened. Northwestern carried a pretty small team, like a lot of colleges do. I think we only had, 7 or 8 players due to the number of scholarships that were available. Pat Goss, my coach, had kind of turned that program around. And from day one, when I stepped on campus, I thought I was something special. My parents always treated me that way. They coddled me. I'd never been away from home. And I rolled into Evanston and quickly got the message that I was not special, that there were a lot of people that were smarter than me, more athletic than me, more talented than me. If I wanted to participate on any level, I was going to have to work hard, in the classroom, in the weight room, on the golf course. And sort of the tough love that I received from my coach over that 4-year period, I think really shaped who I became as a man. So it was a really great experience for me.
Now, when you were out here in Arizona in high school, you said you went to Thunderbird High School and obviously playing in golf in high school out here. What was that like in the summers out here, man? Like, Chicago's completely different. You're out there in the blazing heat, 110 plus, or was the season more so in the winter when you were out there on the golf course here in Phoenix?
When I think back to the Junior Golf Association of Arizona, it was a summer schedule just because that's when kids were out of school. And so you'd get dropped off and they tried to get you out as early as you could, but you're walking and carrying in 110 plus degree weather. And so, you got used to heat. But the interesting part about Arizona is, the wind never blows. There's barely any trees. I'd call it air golf, if you will. The minute I got back to Chicago, I was like, holy shit, it's blowing.
What is this?
There's elevation. You got to hit it through windows, tree-lined fairways. So it's certainly a different game.
Well, it's pretty impressive to, obviously you have to get up that early when you're a high schooler. And it's like, dude, if all summer long, I wasn't waking up till like 11 a.m. We're sleeping forever. Like, it's just, you're not getting up. So to develop that discipline and consistency, because you had to in golf, probably taught you what you just explained in college. And then that translated into your professional life and all that. It all started from there. And there's not a lot of people that have that discipline and consistency. And that's why I think youth sports and athletics in general provide that for so many people. Both my kids are in competitive sports, and I know your girls are in competitive swim and doing different things like that. And it's just, I think it's an important aspect of life and the team, vibe and working together. But golf is it's in its own beast. It's very mental, right? It's all mindset, and you have a team, but it's all you. Like you have a coach and a caddy or whatever, but it's all you. You don't have any other areas to look at other than if I'm failing, it's because of me, right? And I got to figure that out, and I got to learn from those mistakes and learn along the way. And so it's an incredible sport, and you're obviously very good at it. I've never played with you. Phil, have you played with Casey?
I have not.
You guys haven't gotten together? You got the high school.
He keeps delaying the whooping he's going to put on me. No, I actually had to cancel on that, but I can't wait to get out. It's going to be a blast. We could talk about. Go ahead.
I should say just a quick comment on the golf, and we'll get off that topic. But I mean, Stephen, you talk about sort of the mental aspect of it. In a lot of sports, if you can get bigger, stronger, and faster, that's going to equate to more success. And
sure,
golf is not so much that way, right? It's unique in the way that you have to approach it mentally, some of the mechanics, and it's very similar to business. I wish that business was as easy as working hard and you find success, but you actually have to figure out what it is that you're going to work hard at. And that's sort of the mystery in all of it. There is no bigger, stronger, faster.
Yeah, if you can have John Daly and Tiger Woods putting up the same similar numbers on the same field, the same course, that tells you something that you don't have to. It's not all about being super athletic. It's about how you develop and get through the tough times mentally and just putting in that focus.
Couldn't agree with your metaphor. I mean, that's a whole podcast to its own on the similarities between golf and business, like what's outside of your control, what's inside of your control, the preparation, shot by shot. I could talk about that all day because it does teach you so much. And I think that's why it's so awesome for young people, because I didn't connect those dots back at the time playing competitive golf. It's not until you've been through the ringer on both sides where you're like, wow, this is very similar. But we could talk about that all day. But I did want to chime in. Stephen, you already kind of alluded to it when we were prepping for this one, or when I was prepping for it. I'm like, man, these are two guys that have a really great perspective on legacy businesses. And we've talked about it a lot in Junto, in some vulnerable conversations on some of the pressure and the honoring of legacy and the plan that is involved, and thought that knew you two would have some great comparing and contrasting, because they are still very different stories. But I believe Strunk Insurance has been around since 82, somewhere around there. Is that accurate? With you taking the reins, I guess, and this is a loaded question, but would love for you to talk through the way that you can on, as you made the decision that this was the direction you were going to take your career. How did that develop in your mind on how the two-folded combination of honoring your father's legacy and what has been put in place, but knowing how you want to define success for yourself and really put in the effort and work to grow it in a unique way as well? Could you talk through kind of your mindset and how you've approached that from Jump Street, or however far you want to go back when that decision was kind of percolating?
Well, first and foremost, I feel very blessed to have worked with my father for the last 20 years. It's interesting, when he's in town, he still comes in, I think because he doesn't want to sit at home all day. And it gives me an opportunity to rap with him about business, about personal stuff, pop in for 2 or 3 minutes here and there and catch up several days a week. And I just don't know if I would really have that opportunity or have such a close relationship with him if I wasn't in the same building with him a couple days a week. So that part of it's been fantastic. And we've been lucky in that, over 20 years, I can't think of an instance where we've had sort of a fallout or a blow up or a major disagreement. I went into this knowing that my goal was to try to make a contribution and try to be relevant in the agency in some shape or form as a young man. And as it became clear that I was having an impact, that I was starting to lead people, that there were changes that I was making inside the business that were propelling us forward, I think it became clear that at some point in time, I would ultimately take over the business. It was not always clear for me or him if I'd have the maturity, desire, or wherewithal to do it. When you think about my father's generation, he's 74 right now. There was not a lot of technology at Strunk 20 years ago. There was not a lot of branding at Strunk 20 years ago. When you think about an employee-centric culture, that was not something that existed really anywhere 20 years ago. And so slow shifts over time. And then, really once I purchased the agency from him, I was able to sort of accelerate some of that change. I like to say that I was probably the cheapest labor that he ever had. I think I was doing 4 or 5 jobs at the same time. And so I was of the mentality that I needed to get a lot off my desk. We needed to hire more people. I'd take a pay cut to make that happen because growth was going to be in our future. And I needed to be available to work sort of in my highest talents.
Yeah, I love that story. My dad and I started this a couple of years ago. I reached out to him. I was like, hey, Dad, I come from an entrepreneurial family as well. We worked together for a couple of years. And then when he sold the business, I stayed with ADP. And life gets busy, right? You have kids and all this stuff. And you kind of, your parents are getting older and you don't always get the time alone with them. And so we started this monthly coffee meeting. And it's been some of the most impact. Like, we got to put it on the calendar. And it's just weird to say, but sometimes you just got to make that happen. And we spend an hour once a month just grabbing coffee. Now, obviously, I see him and we talk to, outside of that as well. But those are some of the most impactful times when it's just one-on-one and you're just picking their brain, you're sharing what's going on in your world. I feel very grateful and blessed as well to have a father that went through his own entrepreneurial journey, and I can share some of the things that I go through and get some advice and all that stuff. But I think just the work ethic back then, man. I mean, he's in he just turned 70 this year, and it was a different time. There was no internet. There was many hours put in the office, and you just saw that growing up, right? And you just saw that and what that took. But then to your point, bringing in kind of modernizing certain things and self-branding in a way and really focusing on that legacy for what you want for your own kids, because your father started that. And then now you see what's possible for you and your family, and then building things for the next 1,000 years, right? And just setting it up along the way to want to teach your children and educate them on what life is like at a younger age than I think even we were probably taught, on how the business works, how the world works from our perspective, and really having those deep conversations with our young kids. That's what legacy is all about. And even if you don't have children, it's the positive impact you're making on those around you and the community around you by just being a model of excellence, and you exude that. And it's really cool to see. And I'm blessed to, I think I speak on behalf of Phil, to have you in my corner as well to chit chat about those things. So tell me, once you bought the agency, were you scared, man? Now it's like everything it's on me. If this fails, there's no one else it's going to fall back on. Like, what was that like when you said, okay, yes, I'm going to do this? Did you have a plan B potentially? Or were you like, there's just no way this is ever going to fail. I'm going to continue making this bigger, better, faster.
I mean, taking a step back, I don't think I have any illusions that I could have done what my father did in terms of starting a business from scratch. And I give him all the credit in the world. Only so far, though, he could really take it with the skill set that he had as the world was changing around him really quickly. I was scared shitless in a lot of ways, Stephen.
Yeah, I bet.
My father's retirement and legacy was now in my hands. Failure didn't necessarily cross my mind because it was not an option, but it was always looming, right? I mean, it still is
for sure
today. Even while we continue to grow and continue to do great things, you're always nervous about that misstep and how far back it will send you. Teresa and I were actually talking about this idea of the fearless leader, and whoever said that all leaders were fearless was full of it, right? I think it's just making decisions despite that fear.
And isn't it funny how we use that term so often, almost in a joking fashion? The fearless leader, my fearless, like we say it tongue in cheek. That's a really interesting point because it's become one of those sayings that, our fearless leader, or even if you're in a social setting, is really interesting. I had never thought about that until this moment, how it's almost, it's the action while fear is present. That's interesting.
Well, and speaking of legacy and family, and you mentioning Teresa, your beautiful wife, she works with you at Strunk HR and is involved. And so what's that like? And trying to compartmentalize or maybe integrate, however you look at it. We talk a lot about work-life integration as opposed to work-life balance, so that way we can just live a life that's flowing. But you have a spouse, you're working together, but you also have a family and kids and personal stuff going on. So how do you work through that and try and not let one overtake the other?
Well, when we had our daughter, Rachel, 6 years ago, Teresa had a successful career in advertising sales. She took some time off, and I just looked at her and said, look, if you're going to be selling anything for anybody, it needs to be for Strunk. So, ultimately, we didn't know what that role would look like, but we knew that she was great at creating relationships. We knew that she was great in her marketing and the way that she cared for people. And so we've had to carve out her role, and it's continued to evolve over the years. But Teresa does an excellent job of being a brand ambassador for us in the community, creating relationships and new business opportunities, taking care of our team, and planning a lot of the stuff that we do on a monthly and quarterly basis. We did decide that sharing an office and her coming into the office was probably not the best thing for our marriage after we tried that for a while. So, we stay in our own lanes and complement each other the best we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So I want to talk about Rise and Ruck for a minute. So this was a new thing last year, right? You started this last year, Rise and Ruck, and it's the kind of an executive ruck, you call it. And it's basically changing how networking or happy hours, or I guess eliminating what a normal happy hour would be and changing it to the morning, getting outside, physical activity, but bringing professionals to connect and collaborate with each other in a really unique way. And you started this thing, and what got you into rucking? How did you come up with this idea? I go every single month and have met some amazing people. Finally dragged Phil out of bed early on a Friday morning last month and got him out there right in his backyard, by the way. It took me 6 months. Phil, you're coming every month now. But in all seriousness, where did you come up with the idea? What got you into rucking? And where did this come from? What was the purpose?
Well, I was fortunate enough to listen to Michael Easter speak at a learning event for EO in town. And at that time, he was promoting Comfort Crisis. And if anybody listening has not read it, I'd highly encourage you to do so. And it touches on a range of things, how connected we are to our cell phones, our devices, the conveniences that we have in this world, but also really doing hard things and getting outside of your comfort zone. And he took this trip to Alaska, caribou hunt, and spent a chapter or two talking about this idea of rucking and how humans were really designed to carry heavy loads on their back, to walk over long periods of time. It's what we've done for hundreds of thousands of years. And so after listening to Michael and reading that book, I went out and I bought a pack. And then shortly thereafter, I was in a mastermind in the Midwest with another broker. And he had said that he had started a sort of a community ruck for his clients and his friends and whomever. And I said, Dom, can I steal this idea? And, we branded it Rise and Ruck Phoenix. You guys both know intimately sort of the changes that I've made in my life over the last 4.5 years. And I think for me, it was about missing a sense of community. When you focus on your fitness, when you focus on your nutrition, when you say yes to those things, you have to say no to a lot of other things. And so those were, the nights out, happy hours, some of the frivolous occasions that normally I'd always be at. And so I was missing a lot of connections in my life. And Rise and Ruck for me is a way to not only meet new people, but to make sure that those people that are important to me, I'm spending time with them on a monthly basis, that we're connecting in meaningful ways, moving our bodies outside. And so, you and Ben like to call it the new happy hour. And that's certainly the case for me.
Incredible event. I was so glad to finally attend. And you and I were exchanging messages this morning about how we were, just because of the nature of the event itself, able to connect a couple people here in the Valley that had an immediate impact on those orgs. And you want to talk about real-time evidence of the power of getting like-minded people together, moving, letting those thoughts move. You're just stacking this perfect environment for that to happen. Unbelievable. And I knew we'd get here at some point in the podcast, but tying into the fitness and nutrition, you've been a beacon of excellence for the group. And it's so interesting because Stephen and I were starting to work toward this with a number of the other guys in Junto, just getting it on the radar of this concept of what we call the business athlete, the executive athlete. And we've been talking about it more and more. And you've had such a positive impact, not only with your presentation, but with Ben that's come through. And it's really starting to, that repetition in consciousness is happening, but want to make sure we can touch on that and talk through just at a high level, your transformation there. And so the listeners can get, an example of someone that's actually living it by definition, day in and day out. Talk about your journey a little bit there and how it's impacted your business and your life.
It's interesting because, I'd only met you guys sort of after some of these changes had start to happen. And so I still have this very divided view of myself of who I was and who I am today. And at times it's, it's uncomfortable to own that, but I try to do every single day, and, try to normalize this idea of talking about the fact that we can all get better in a lot of different ways. But it was 4.5 years ago, and I remember sitting on the patio up at my parents' house in the White Mountains after the 4th of July, eating, drinking for another 4 or 5 day stretch. And I was just feeling uncomfortable in my own skin. I didn't like the way that I looked in the mirror. I didn't like the way that I felt. And I certainly was starting to realize that I wasn't setting the best example for 2 beautiful girls that were growing up in my house. And so I started working with Ben Brown of Body Systems, who you guys just had on. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. I knew it was going to be scary and uncomfortable. And, over a period of about 6 months, I went from a pretty sloppy 210 pounds down to about 180 pounds. A lot of people might stop after 6 months of working with Ben. And I immediately said, all right, let's re-up for another year. That I was just starting to scratch the surface of some of the stuff that we could get done. 4.5 years later, I am still paying Ben. I think I just submitted my 234th spreadsheet to him on Monday with
Dude,
my macros for the week.
You're a beast.
My prescribed training, my sleep, my steps, my stress. And so it's become a very, very important part of my life. Number one, just the identity that I've taken on, and this idea that it's our job to recognize and set an example for what excellence can be. And so if I can do that in some small way to inspire others, that's great. I mean, I've referred Ben over 20 clients over the past couple of years. Some have done okay, some have failed, but it's really had a more transformational effect on the way that I show up as a husband, as a father, inside my business. It's nice to be a little bit leaner and a little bit fitter. But the real impact is who I've become as a person along the way. So
you're an absolute beast. If you're not following Casey on Instagram, he shows you his consistency and the stuff that he does. And he's working out on vacation. He's working out on, but it's not like to the point where that's all you do, right? You're running a business. You've got a family. You're building it into your life, and you've made that shift 4.5 years ago. And Ben Brown is awesome. We had him on the pod. He comes to the Rucks as well. And I actually just started working with him as well. So I'm excited to see what that looks like, because I've been on a similar journey myself in the last couple of years and have built the foundation, but the whole nutrition and accountability piece is where I struggled. And I think that's the needle mover for me is, like, it doesn't start with just, hey, I'm going to wake up and hit the gym every day and I'm going to go run or I'm going to eat healthy. Like, it's, as Ben says it, it's small, little consistent changes over time that eventually become the person that you want to be. And you have this identity shift and you get to show up healthy, happy, and focused for your family and those around you. And so I did not know you before 4.5 years ago. It sounds like it's possible that we would have ran in same circles and done very similar things and had a great time back then too. But I do like this version as well. And I can resonate with, getting obsessed with the morning routine and getting obsessed with how you want to be the next day. You can't act like a fool the night before. And so you kind of, what are you going to sacrifice for the things that you want? And you embody that business athlete mindset. And it's a cool story, man. It's something that a lot of people I talk to, I work with a lot of small business owners, and a lot of these people are running around with their head cut off in chaos because they're saying yes to everything, or they're stagnant and they don't have quite the direction of where they want to go. And if you put your focus on yourself and your health, and you put your focus on how to be the best version of yourself each and every day, usually things work out in your favor when you kind of make it simple. So,
and we're talking about it a lot lately, whether this medium or Ingento. And I'm sorry, I'm not sorry that we keep bringing it up in all of these different mediums, because it's the simple, not easy that you are able to deliver in a really clear way and show the evidence of the results. So it's incredible.
Oh, yeah. And to go back to your point, Stephen, I mean, I'm super excited you're working with Ben. And for anybody out there, we talked about it. You can work really hard, but it doesn't always mean that you're making progress. And having somebody that can help you streamline that journey and be an accountability partner in any area of your life makes a tremendous impact.
Yeah, I filled out his assessment and it was like, what's going to stop you from, what's stopping you from achieving your goals? And I answered, When I don't know what to eat, I make nachos. It's like he sent me his assessment back with his video on Loom. And he goes, Steven, it was perfect timing. I'm glad you submitted this. I just got done downing a giant plate of nachos. And he's like, had to make a joke about it. But it's true. Like the accountability piece, like I'm a data junkie. I think that's where Ben's program will be super helpful for me is like tracking the progress and seeing it because you're not going to see it every single day. And so, but you can see it if you track it along the way for 2 months, you're like, oh shit, I was there 2 months ago and now I'm here. And that's pretty cool. I'm going to keep going. And then the data elements that he provides that you can actually track your progress in terms of your weight, your body fat percentage, your nutrition, the calories, all that stuff. I'm excited for it. So thank you for bringing him into our worlds because I think he's going to be a huge asset for me and obviously many others within our group and out there in the world.
100%.
I did want to take it back to the business and even for the listeners, with at Strunk, in one of your open letters, you were talking about the overcomplication of health benefits in one of your letters. And I think it's something that all the listeners can relate to, given the complication as they are going through their own makeup of their plans and policies. But from a business level, you talk about how the simplification is doable. And I think that resonates with a lot of folks as individuals and as businesses as they're trying to put the best plan together for their employees. Can you talk about how you're approaching that at a high level for the listeners? And because I think that the way that you communicate it on LinkedIn and in your writing it really does separate you from the rest of the market, and was curious about your thought process there.
Yeah, well, we did some soul searching a couple of years ago as we were trying to figure out, what segment of the market were we going to own? How were our conversations going to be different with our clients? And everything that we do just kept pointing us to this idea of advocacy. And so, our mission is to set a new standard for advocacy in the market. And we call it committed advocacy here at Strunk. And really all that is a partner that is consistently acting in the best interest of a business and its people. And so, you can go out and hire the best benefit consultant in the entire world, but if they don't know how to communicate with you, communicate with your people, and make that process feel good, you're not going to get an ROI on your money. And so, we're looking to work with these caring trailblazers. These are bold, decisive leaders that care not only about their bottom line, but the well-being of their people. They are trying to hire a who in us to allow us to do our best work. They're not going to get in the middle of our process. There has to be a certain level of trust there. And so, really for us, it just comes down to consistent communication and committed advocacy in the way that we approach their business and their people. How do you
portray that? Do you guys do like frequent check-in calls with clients? You hear about like health brokers like, oh, I'll catch you at renewal. That's like once a year. I can't imagine a committed advocate's only touching base with their client once a year. So talk a little bit about that and how you manage such great retention.
Yeah, we view ourselves as an integral part of their team or an extension of their team. We're talking to our clients on a daily or weekly basis because we're involved in them running their benefits program. It all filters through our office. So anytime there's a new hire, an employee question, a billing issue, a life-changing event, that all happens through Strunk. And then the majority of our clients are on self-funded plans where we get a lot of data. Being on a fully insured health plan is like having a credit card and never really knowing what you spent. You don't receive any information on what it is that your employees are consuming. So inside of those self-funded health plans, it gives us a lot of data to sit down with the employer and really say, here's where the spend is coming from. How much friction do you want to go through to change the course of where this is headed? Be it through care delivery to the employees, different pre-certifications that they might have to go through, outsourcing prescription drugs or a million different other things. But we can educate that employer and employee to be good consumers of healthcare.
Nice. It's super important, and it's one of those things where it's not required, right? It's only required for businesses over 50 employees. Small businesses do not have to offer health insurance, but it's super important to, have in your shop, even if you are a small business, if you can swing it. And it's not cheap though. It's the hardest thing is people look at it as a cost thing, but well, okay, what's the cost of not retaining top talent? What's the cost of not recruiting great employees that would probably be a part of your organization if you had awesome health insurance? That's what they need for their life. And so it's that, I would imagine a lot of your clients you work with them because they're also committed advocates for their employees. And it is more of a partnership. And I think that's where you shine too, is the HR piece. It's not just, hey, let me get you a plan. It's like, hey, if you hire a new person, let me help you onboard them. Let me help you explain those benefits to them, because it is a very confusing topic and not a lot of businesses fully understand it, especially if they don't have internal staff. And so it's you are an advocate for this community. And I think you are nationwide. I believe you're not just in Arizona, but you do some amazing work. And we've partnered with you guys on the payroll side of things for a few years now. And so it's always great to work with like-minded individuals.
And you've covered a little bit of it up to this point with some of the questions, but curious on when you look at the future in such a complex environment with everything changing, the goal to simplify. What do you see on the horizon as Strunk is staying ahead of the curve with the focus that you have? What are some of the things that you see changing that you're getting ahead of to keep that edge along with this committed advocacy branding that is, I don't know, to me it lands very well and is very differentiated. But as you're looking at the future, what are some of the corners you're trying to look around?
Oh, I mean, when people think about health insurance, they think about Aetna, Blue Cross, Cigna, United Healthcare. And in some markets across the country, there might be, two players there. But what businesses of all sizes might or might not realize is that, you can unbundle all of that. You can go out and rent your own network. You can hire your own pharmacy benefit manager. You can buy reinsurance and create your own health plan. And depending upon, again, how much work you're willing to put in and how much friction you're willing to put in front of the employees, I mean, there are huge cost savings available to employers that are willing to go first. And that's really what we see is that everyone says they want to save money, lower their healthcare costs, improve their benefits. But not a lot of people are willing to go first and go through the work of doing that and have a name on their card that their employees might not recognize. So I think that's where it's heading. Is just alternative solutions outside of the big four in most cases.
So when you think about health insurance, most people are thinking medical, dental, vision, maybe some life insurance is thrown in there, critical illness, accidents type of stuff. What's one of the coolest programs that you've been able to put together for clients? It's kind of an outside the box thing that's like, whoa, I didn't even know we could offer this to our staff. And it's super awesome that you brought this up.
Over the last 24 months or so, we've leaned in pretty heavily to an overlay product that we have in place with our 10 or 15 largest clients today. But when we think about our demographic and younger, when we think about specifically a male population, not a lot of folks have a primary care relationship. There's often a shortage of primary care doctors that are readily available. And so for us, it's been putting in this virtual direct primary care solution that employees have access to at no cost. And I'm not talking about telemedicine where you dial a 1-800 number and get a different doctor every time. I'm talking about a dedicated physician that is available for that employer. And that physician starts to build relationships with employees. They can send them out for labs. And they act as the first line of defense for really anything and everything. And it's done at no cost to the employee and insulates a health plan. So for us, it's just sort of the next evolution of where virtual care is heading.
That's awesome. I don't go to the doctor very often, but when I do call them, it's like, yeah, we'll see you in January and we're sitting here in October. It's like, what the heck? Like, what if I needed to see you sooner? And like, well, if it's an emergency, go to urgent care or the hospital. Right. And it's like, well, that's a $5,000 bill every time you walk into the hospital. That's awesome. Like to have access to that and the direct relationship. I actually hadn't heard that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think that as we're starting to wrap up here, and Steven's gonna give you classic
the tough question,
SuccessFlow
Casey.
question. But before that, I just wanted to call out, you had a post this week that really hit home with me, and just getting to know you on a couple committees and just working through, how we're going through conversations and some of that with Junto, that you are a guy that plays intentional calendar Tetris like we all do, right? We live and die by the calendar. All we have is time, and that we have is time and energy. Utilizing that, you are kind of building in public to a certain extent. Family time does not seem to be sacrificed. Is that something that you've always had? Was your father the same way, or was that a part of the growing period of recent years, the way that you approach energy, time, and how you're breaking down quite the bandwidth demanding workload?
It's something that's new in the last several years, Phil. I mean, I remember a lot of mornings where, I'd wake up at 3:30 or 4 and try to get some hours in at the house. I'd stay at the office until 6 or 6:30, and it was just sort of all consuming for me during certain seasons of our business. And when I started to focus more on myself, I became more aware of stress in general. And there was a point in time where I just drew a line in the sand and said, I am no longer going to care beyond these hours of the day. I want to be able to pick up my kids from school. I want to be at their practices. I want to be present for dinner, bath, bedtimes, books, breakfasts in the morning. And so, a lot of that comes down to just saying no to a lot of things, but also, you just have to detach yourself from the day to day and realize that it will be there tomorrow. And if you're operating efficiently within the hours that you've defined as your work hours, like that's when you got to go get it.
Such a good answer. Such a good, concise answer.
It is a great answer. Casey, one of the first times that I talked to you, probably don't remember this at all. One of the first times I talked with you, I think Chris Duncan introduced us years ago. And he's like, oh, you got to reach out to Casey Strunk. And I was like, okay, perfect. And I'm so in the mode of like coffee meeting, lunch meeting, like spending an hour with somebody. And, and then you waste probably 45 minutes of that meeting, eating lunch and talking about stuff that doesn't really matter. And I was like, Casey, let's, Chris Duncan introduced us. Let's grab coffee or lunch or whatever. And you responded with like, how about a 15-minute call? You think we could just knock it out then? I was like, okay. And then we chatted for 15 minutes and it was done, and boom, we moved on with our lives. I loved it. It was so great. You're just super efficient.
It's unfortunate. To your point, Stephen, like how many of those could you potentially get in a month or in a week? And by the time you drive, right, by the time you sit down, the pleasantries, like for me, it's like, let's just figure out if there's any synergy to even start, and then we can build a relationship. I had a call from somebody the other day and he said, we'd love to take you and your team out to happy hour. And I just said, I don't need happy hours. I don't need to be entertained. My currency is results for my clients. And so if you have an idea on how we can better improve their situation, great, get back to me. It's just, you feel like a dick, but it's what it takes to be protective of your calendar.
Vitamin N.
Yeah. Next time someone asks me to do something, I'm going to hit chat Casey Strunk AI and be like, how should I respond to this so I can get out of this one in a really great way? Dude, the currency of my
2 letters. And
the currency is the results for my clients. Like, that's what you care about. And it's just like, I'm not going to waste my time, being entertained, as you said, just because let's see if we got some synergies and make it happen after that. But I appreciate that. Thanks that was awesome. All right. So we're going to wrap up. It's the final question of the pod. Roll. Casey Strunk, what does success mean to you?
Sorry to pause here. I don't know if I'll ever arrive at a place where I feel like I've been successful. And I think, the minute you feel like you are successful or you have arrived is the minute that you start slipping backwards. And so I ask myself all the time, like, when is it going to be enough? Not monetarily or business growth or whatever else, but just like satisfying for me. And I don't know if I'll ever get there, Stephen. I feel sorry for my wife. I can be a little bit too focused at times on the things that move me forward, but that's my answer.
Blissfully dissatisfied.
There you go. Well, how can, let's say anyone listening to the pod wants to find you, get a hold of you. What's the best way to do it? Social media or get in touch with you for insurance stuff?
Strunkgroup.com is our website. I think the best way to look me up is on Instagram, Casey Strunk. Subscribe to the Committed Advocate newsletter and shoot me a note.
Thanks for being a model of excellence and rapping with us. I know we'll see each other soon, but thank you very much for joining us, and keep on keeping on. You're the man.
That was fun.
Well, Steve,
thanks,
appreciate
Casey.
you guys. Thank you.